Are you an Outlaw rogue who spent hours running around Dornogal last season waiting for a Mythic Plus invite because you wouldn't cave and go assassination because you're truly not content unless you're pressing more keys per minute than Lang Lang on methamphetamine? Then boy, have I got good news for you. A brand new Outlaw build taking advantage of our new 4 set has emerged that has seemed to place us just short of, dare I say, meta. Right, so this was the script I had written last week, but in the early hours of Saturday morning, Blizzard decided to drop this bombshell. So it's somewhat altered the trajectory of this video. And I know what you're probably saying already, like, Fieldy, it's just a hotfix, big deal, just get over it. Well, they fixed the bug, it's a good thing, right? No. I'll explain why. We'll get to the hotfix, which was, by the way, for full transparency, an 8 to 10% nerf, but perhaps not in the way that you'd think. So now, instead of a video of singing Outlaw's praises and telling you all how amazingly it's doing, and you know, we have been doing fine, I'm now going to take the opportunity to perhaps highlight some things that have plagued the spec for perhaps too long now, which are now slightly accentuated by this hotfix. So if you're brand new to the spec, or you're on the fence about playing it, or if you're an experienced Outlaw rogue yourself and you just need a bit of validation, tune in. But first, for those who are perhaps unfamiliar with the emotional rollercoaster it is to be Outlaw, let's just set the scene a little bit with a recap of Outlaw Rogue in the War Within thus far. So, Outlaw Rogue had a somewhat rocky start going into the War Within after what was, in all fairness, a pretty solid performance in Dragonflight. Outlaw entered the World Soul Saga immediately slapped with a new haste tax due to Adrenaline Rush now scaling with haste. Acrobatic strikes got thrown in the bin, and the hero talents were passive and lackluster. Not to mention one hero spec forced you into killing spree, provided a permanent Trickster trade that didn't actually work, as well as an empowered Eviscerate called Coup de Grace, which triggered automatically at enough unseen blade stacks, and then locked you into an animation, as if one of those wasn't already enough. Being forcibly held hostage to this animation with no control over when it procced felt so bad that Rogue Theory Crafters actually crunched the numbers and figured out you simmed higher without it. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Taking the final node of your hero talent tree was actually a DPS loss. Unreal, I know. The other tree was fine, I guess. You just flipped coins. And if you were still willing to give Outlaw a chance at this point, this particular coin-flipping hero spec, Fatebound, ended up being the path that you took for Season 1. And to be fair, as Nerebar Palace opened, we were initially kind of pumping, but then everyone got their 4 sets and better gear, certain specs soon began to scale better, and we fell back a bit, yet nevertheless doing fine. However, in top mythic groups, perhaps still not being taken regardless due to the usual main gripe with Outlaw, being a very flat damage profile with no real burst at times when you needed it. Mythic Plus, on the other hand, very much so became an assassination tier. Outlaw's numbers at the time just weren't enough to overshadow our capped AoE and hard-to-shake reputation as a meme spec. As keys got higher and packs lived longer, Assassination really began to shine and took the crown for the season. So personally, I knew when to take a hint, and the only pushing I did on Outlaw was in Solo Shuffle and Battleground Blitz, where we have absolutely zero kill pressure, but nice control. And then as Season 2 approached, with no particularly generous tuning for Outlaw emerging, I went to the Warcraft 30th anniversary event in London and waited patiently in line to meet none other than Ian Hazakostas and told him that Outlaw needed a buff and then slipped him a 20. No, not really. I didn't actually bribe him, but I did actually jokingly ask him to give Outlaw some love, to which he just laughed. Although about a week or two later, just before 11.1 was due to drop, we did get some buffs, so you're all very welcome. They were, however, annoyingly pretty minor, and mainly just a buff to the shambles that was Trickster. But, to Blizzard's credit, the Coup de Grace node had since been reworked to something you actually pressed, giving you agency on when you use it. It didn't lock you into an animation anymore, and you could actually press it twice in succession for a double hit if Adrenaline Rush was up. At this point, we had no idea if this was a bug or intended. We do, unfortunately, now know. We're getting there. Permatrix now kind of work sometimes. And Killing Spree now, well, no. Killing Spree is still just a shit game of Russian roulette. Blizzard, please. Not that there are any really good games of Russian roulette. And then Season 2 started, and as expected, due to Sims just before 11.1, Subtlety emerged as the go-to spec, having the most representation in the race of World First and actually being present for the world's first Mythic Galliwix kill. Despite Subtlety's best simming trinket this tier, until you get House of Cards, being a trinket from last season, which forces you to do a literal fucking side quest before you get the buff.
Collect or stand in circle. Jump 3 times.
But then, something truly wondrous happened. Sims generated with Outlaw's 4 set revealed a new potentially optimal hidden opportunity build that really snuck up on theory crafters, which capitalized on the 4 set by allowing you to spec out of loaded dice and into sleight of hand instead to further increase the chance of a 5 or more buff roll. And the roll rule is simple. Didn't get a 5 or more buff? Roll again until you do. And that's it. The final touch to this build being a shift down this path on the rogue tree, taking you into Supercharger, which now has much more value due to the sheer number of times you'll now be rolling. And this new hidden opportunity build has now been dominating raid logs and Mythic Plus, achieving the highest of passes on Mythic raid logs and being viable in the highest of keys being played right now. In a lot of cases, outsimming Keep It Rolling's version of the new Supercharger build, which is wild, as the trickier Keep It Rolling has always traditionally been ahead of hidden opportunity on Sims. So it's great news for newcomers to the spec. For context, for those not entirely familiar with Outlaw, for quite a while there have been 2 main Outlaw builds, each with their own single target and AoE variations, Hidden Opportunity and Keep It Rolling. Hidden Opportunity is a standard bare bones build, while still retaining the extremely high APM playstyle required from the spec. It's the most straightforward, requires very little haste for the new haste tax, and follows standard roll rules. It's a build that anyone new to Outlaw would and should spec into. Keep It Rolling, on the other hand, is trickier to play, has more to track with slightly more convoluted roll rules, and has slightly unorthodox parameters for the build to even work, such as completely removing ambush from your bars. It has a huge haste tax to be met before it's even viable, and as a result of all this, has always simmed a few % higher. So while certainly not being for newcomers to the spec, it was the build you'd be expected to run for any meaningful high key or mythic progression, which is why the fact that this new Supercharger hidden opportunity build simming around the same as, and in a lot of cases even higher than the Keep It Rolling build, was enough to make some waves in the rogue community. That said, this new version of the hidden opportunity build with Supercharger does have a much higher haste tax than hidden opportunity builds usually do. Not because of the sheer need for haste like Keep It Rolling does from the lack of taken by surprise, but because this build needs energy, bringing it up to around 16%, so just under what it would be for Keep It Rolling. And just to clarify, these new Supercharger builds only work with the new 4 set. If you haven't got your 4 set yet, just use one of the older builds instead. I'll link them below. So things were looking pretty peachy for Outlaw until last week. Now, remember that coup de grace tip I mentioned about pressing it twice in a row and how we didn't know if it was a bug or intended? Well, yeah, it turned out it was a bug, and Blizzard nipped that shit in the bud. Now, this hotfix hurt us, and it hurt us bad. So after the news drop and the Outlaw section on the Rogue Discord went into meltdown mode, it soon became apparent that this one little hotfix equated to a flat nerf of about 8 to 10%. And it's not even a result of losing the raw damage from being able to press it twice, it's more from how losing this second cast has disrupted the flow of the spec. And here's why. Our passive Restless Blades reduces the cooldown of our abilities with each finisher. The more combo points of the finisher, the higher the cooldown reduction. And this is essentially the backbone of how the spec works, and is the main reason for our flat damage profile, because when you're playing the spec correctly, you don't really have cooldowns in the traditional sense. Your main minigame is keep Adrenaline Rush up as long as you physically can, with the duration of AR being paused in subterfuge crackshot windows, thanks to our talent Upper-Handed Upper Hand. So the more vanishes you cast, the longer AR is up. The longer AR is up, the more finishes you're getting out. The more finishes you're getting out, the faster damage is back to keep AR up. And so the cycle continues. Everything feeds into one another. So naturally, coup de grace, a finisher that adds 5 extra combo points, or however many combo points you cast it with, plus a potential 2 more from Supercharger if you happen to press it after rolling the bones, gave a huge chunk of cooldown reduction and did wonders for the flow of the spec, which, even with the minimal bad luck protection we have from Count the Odds, was exactly what we needed for this new slightly RNG iteration of Outlaw. I mean, it would have been nice if they'd just nerfed the flat damage of coup de grace, but still allowed us to press it 2 times, purely just so we could keep the cooldown reduction. That would have been a nice compromise. But this isn't the first time Rogue has had a suspiciously unintended gameplay mechanic that gets taken advantage of, and the last one I can remember actually did get left alone. If you played Subtlety Rogue way back in Legion, you'll remember that our main big finisher before it unfortunately got relegated to a PvP talent in BFA was Death from Above. Yeah, before you had Secret Technique, you had glorious Death from Above. And this finisher was one of the reasons Subtlety Rogues were dominating the meters during Antorus. Not just because of the finisher itself and damage increases from Shadow Blades, vanishing for the guaranteed crit from the legendary shoulder effect, but also the damage increase from being in Shadow Dance, which you applied to Death from Above, not before casting it, but instead by spamming your Shadow Dance keybind while you're locked into the animation, so as you land back on the ground, in the split-second window that you have to do it, you apply the damage increase from Shadow Dance to the finisher, causing you to hit ridiculous numbers. Now, I don't think anyone can honestly say that they think that's intended gameplay on Blizzard's behalf, purely because of how unorthodox that kind of gameplay is, but nevertheless, it worked. and Blizzard let sub-rogues have that one and just left it alone. And as a result, sub-rogues were the go-to spec for rogue by the time Antorus came around. So it would have been nice if they could have just done the same thing for something like this, but hey. And there's speculation among Outlaw enjoyers that Blizzard might not have truly realised how much this hotfix would hurt the spec, indicative from the fact that there has, at time of recording, been 0 buffs anywhere to compensate for the hotfix. Which I think is an opinion not completely outside the realm of possibility if you're operating under the assumption that Blizzard isn't hellbent on nerfing Outlaw into the ground at the mere indication that it is now, once again having representation in high keys and Mythic Raid. So, imagining the worst case scenario where we don't get any buffs to compensate the hotfix, and that cooldown reduction we had is well and truly lost. What does this mean for Outlaw going forward this season? Well, firstly for Raid, at least for single target, this has brought the current Trickster single target builds back in line with the Fatebound ones where, depending on your own personal sim, should now be around the same-ish, which is kind of a shame because it kind of makes the Trickster buffs that we got at the beginning of the season a bit redundant now. But on the other hand, perhaps a blessing in disguise because now there's no longer pressure to try and make Killing Spree work on Sprocket like an absolute fucking psychopath. I personally tested out the single target of Trickster post-hotfix on Mythic Cauldron of Carnage, which is, single target for most of the fight apart from a bit of 2-target cleave. And although my numbers weren't hugely affected, I could feel the effect of less cooldown reduction and it felt bad. Even with robotic perfect play, when you get shit rolls, lose uptime from doing mechanics that you need to move out for, plus purposefully holding Killing Spree until you have a window you can press it where you don't die, there are going to be times that you lose AR as a result and get stuck in that awful situation where you've lost AR and you're doing tank damage while you wait for AR to come back, but AR isn't coming back because you're too energy starved to get the finishers out to bring it back. It fucking sucks. So add this new hotfix into the mix and this shit situation just becomes even easier to fall into. For Mythic Plus and AoE in general, Trickster is still way ahead and still seems to be used widely. As I'm writing this, there are Outlaw rogues, well, understandably not over the moon about the nerf, still regardless, playing them in keys way higher than the ones I'm even doing. Archon, if this is anything to really go by, shows that Assassination this week has crept up right behind Outlaw in terms of score and has now actually overtaken it, perhaps indicating some rogues have switched over to Assassination, having a bit more luck there. I know like a new bleed build came out for Assassination, I think, which is doing quite well. But what would I do to fix Outlaw from here? And it's not all because of this nerf. There are, like I said in the beginning, some issues that have plagued the spec for quite a while now that have needed to be addressed, and it's just now I'm noticing them even more because of how they're amplified by this hotfix. What does Outlaw need to really actually be taken seriously in seasons going forward? Now, I think the first thing that any Outlaw rogue would say if you asked them what needs to be changed would be a complete rework or removal entirely of Killing Spree. Now, don't get me wrong, it looks cool as fuck, but it's an extremely outdated ability that just isn't feasible in high-end content in a game that has changed as dramatically as WoW has over the years, where it is now very much the norm to quite literally wipe your entire group from standing on bad a second too long. It feels highly counterintuitive to have a move that is clearly established to you as your most powerful move that should be sent on cooldown for optimal play, but then punishes you for doing so. I've lost count the amount of times in both Keys and Raid where I knew pressing it would result in an immediate death, or a long stun at the very least. And because Killing Spree goes on longer the more combo points you spend on it, if you're pressing it after Roll the Bones with Supercharger up, you are just out of action for an eternity, entirely at the mercy of whatever the encounter now decides to throw at you. There are times that I can recall this season where it was safe to press it, but I still had to hold it based on how Killing Spree was positioning me. Phase 1 of Gallywix is a perfect example of this, where I would have survived pressing it, no mechanics would have killed me, but because of how Gallywix is a Kingaroth style fixed position boss, and therefore makes Killing Spree interact like this, if I was just sending it on cooldown, I would quite often at times not be with my group for the big soak that I need to soak with them, and instead be on the opposite side behind Gally, spanking him repeatedly on the arse like this. If I was assigned to group 1 for the first soak, I'd have to literally hold it in my opener, because if I tried squeezing it in before that first soak comes, there was a good chance I wouldn't be back in time. And assuming Blizzard tests their game, they must be aware of stuff like this, yet still decided to build an entire hero tree around it, and then buff that tree so we played it this season. I mean, hey, at this point, I have suspicions it might just all be an elaborate troll. No wonder Ian just laughed at me when I told him I was Outlaw. Off the top of my head, a good way of reworking Killing Spree would be just making it very similar to Subtlety's secret technique, where clones of yourself do the bulk of the damage instead of you. Just apply that to Killing Spree, and then let the clones stand in the shit. You could have one clone or several doing the dancey animation your character would have usually done, saving you the seizure-inducing camera angles. And if absolutely necessary, Blizz could just tune the damage a little lower to account for the fact that you're not locked into an animation and can keep DPSing during it. Or default, you could have it where it does still lock you into an animation, but it's lightning fast and it does it within a second. I mean, I don't know, man. There's like so many different ways you could do it, but just these two that I've just come up with off the top of my head already sound infinitely better than what it currently is. Although if Blizz were to go down that route, it would be nice if we still did keep the immunity that delays all damage till after the cast, which then turns it into a dot, plus also being immune to knockbacks and the like, which is what makes it such a great spell in PvP. But I know with clones, people are going to say the exact same thing they said about Shadow Dance.
Oh, this ability is too much like subtlety. Oh, this isn't Outlaw.
I mean, fine, man. We can just like give the clones pirate hats or something. Like it'll be fine, man. Like we'll make it work. Actually, I know. Instead of having the clones melee, you can just give them flintlocks. They can just bang their way across the boss. I don't know, man. But for the time being, until Killing Spree is reworked or replaced entirely by something new, it would make sense to bring Fatebound's AoE back up in line with Trickster's AoE, making kamikaze gameplay feel a little bit less mandatory this season. Talking of AoE, uncapped AoE, which we did used to have, is another thing Outlaw rogues would love to see make a return. It would feel great and would most likely allow Outlaw to be taken a little bit more seriously in high keys where entire rooms get pulled and burst down. It would obviously require a hell of a lot of number crunching and tuning to not make us completely broken. There's also the option of not giving Blade Flurry 100% uptime like it used to be in BFA, but to be honest, I hated that and I really wouldn't like that to make a comeback. So if uncapped AoE ever did make a comeback, that would not be the direction I hope they go. Now, there are some who want a whole rework of Outlaw entirely, and I don't know how I'd feel about that, because as exciting as that sounds, I would be scared that the high APM whack-a-mole style of gameplay, which I've grown to love about the spec, ends up getting dumbed down or taken out entirely. The flat damage profile, I'm okay with, because to be honest, it's actually a breath of fresh air going into a new season of Mythic Plus dungeons, and then not having to figure out optimal times to send cooldowns and then when to hold them. I love just being able to just switch off in that regard and just send it every pack. So apart from reworking Killing Spree, bringing back acrobatic strikes for the range, uncapping AoE, maybe making it a bit forgiving if AR drops from having to do a mechanic or simply dying soon after it's pressed, or maybe decreasing its cooldown, that'd be cool. I remember Dawnbreaker in that regard being an absolute nightmare last season as she flew from pack to pack, having to watch on as the duration ticked down and then do tank damage for the next pack and a half. Same as you do this season with Theatre of Pain's portals, and perhaps removing the haste tax that arbitrarily got added at the beginning of the expansion. But all these complaints aside, if you're watching this video and you've got this far, there's a pretty good chance that, like me, you're not one of these players doing 17s, 18s, and the decision on whether or not to go Outlaw is going to be nowhere near as impactful for you as it is for these top 0.1% players. So the TLDR, I guess, is yeah, we did get hurt by the hotfix. Yeah, there are some major quality of life changes that the spec could do with, but if you love the look and feel of Outlaw and you're not pushing the absolute highest level of content, go and play it. It's a great spec. Yeah, it's not going to flow as well as it did last week, but even with the target cap, you're consistently pumping on every pack. You're not having to think about when to send cooldowns, when to hold them, like you do with Sub and Sin, because you simply just don't have any. You're not going to hit the ridiculously high numbers that Subtlety, Assassination, and other specs that have traditional CDs and uncapped AoE are going to hit, but you'll be consistently doing decent numbers throughout, which you'll notice when they have CD downtime and they're tickling the packs and you're not. You'll notice it in raid encounters too, where you will get left in the dust on pull, but in a very Hare and the Tortoise-esque situation, you'll likely finish near the top. With the MDI soon approaching, assuming Rogue in general has any representation, because let's face it, Fire Mage, Boomy, and Unholy DK look like they're on the brink of forming the God Comp 2.0. It will be interesting to see how much representation Outlaw will now have compared to Assassination and Subtlety, now that you've got the bleed build for Assassination and Subtlety. Well, I mean, Subtlety is doing alright, I guess. And in all fairness, as much as I have to say about what Outlaw needs, class balance in Season 2, despite the inevitable outliers and overperformers here and there, which there's always going to be, seems to be pretty good, and almost certainly one of the main factors contributing to why players are lauding this season a huge step up from last season, and even perhaps one of the best seasons we've had in a while. The numbers show that, with the immaculate vibe of Undermine and possibly what is one of the best musical scores the game has ever seen, being the juicy cherry on top. And as for PvP, which I feel like I haven't really touched upon in this video, mainly due to the fact that, apart from setting aside an afternoon to quickly just blast to 1800 for the elite PvP tint of this season's tier set, I haven't yet really sunk my teeth into PvP this season. But if last season was anything to go by, Outlaw really does shine in certain scenarios. Your flat damage profile is unfortunately the same here, and you do have very little kill pressure. but this is almost certainly made up for from the tankiness you have, the sheer amount of vanishes you have to reset and escape, and the sheer control and mobility you have. So while Trickster I believe is being the most played this season, I can personally vouch that playing Fate-bound Outlaw Rogue last season and rated Battleground Blitz was almost borderline fucking cheating, where this little hero talent node enabled you at the start of a match to grapple hook 4 times in a row, get to the node that's nearer the enemy, cap it before they were even close to it. I do have a feeling I remember seeing a hotfix going into this season where the time before the node actually spawned has been increased by 4 seconds now, which has essentially put a stop to that kind of gameplay, which I feel like must have been due to Fate-bound Outlaw. So I'm not quite sure how much use we have now this season in RBGs, but we are, as we speak, having a lot of representation in the AWCs. The only main caveat to Outlaw in PvP, especially in Arena, that I can think of, due to its low kill pressure, yet high control, mobility and crowd control, is basically a spec that allows you to set up opportunities for others, allowing your teammates to shine rather than yourself. So it works at higher brackets with players that know what cues to look out for, or even better ones you're on comms with. But at lower brackets without comms, playing with less experienced players that don't really know what they don't know, perhaps lacking the spatial awareness, the ones that are just tunnel visioning whatever their target is, you may have more success as either subtlety or assassination. So I will be continuing to play Outlaw this season. And if you're brand new to the spec and you were on the fence about trying it, with the easiest build now being arguably the highest performing one, despite the hotfix, now is a better time than ever to give it a go. But what do you guys all think? Are you a player that has never touched Outlaw and had your eye on it, that now may have decided against it as a result of this video, or perhaps the other way around? Or are you an existing Outlaw Rogue player that has been affected by the nerf as well? Or are you really not that bothered about it? Whoever you are, whatever it is, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you all think. But that's all for now. If you like what you saw, like, sub, come and join the squad. Or catch me on Twitch playing live. I'll be streaming keys, delves, and the raid as well. If you want to come and see me and the rest of my guild Immortalis progress through Mythic Liberation of Undermine, Thursdays and Sundays, come check us out. But until next time, as always guys, take care.